Hello, everyone. My name is Abhyasa Santoso, and today my group will be presenting our presentation regarding Boeing 737's MAX crisis, a case of decision failure and risk management. Here we have all the members in my group, which consist of me, myself, Abhyasa, Mawar, Callista, and Reza. Here I'll be explaining the purpose of our report. So first is to analyze Boeing's 737 MAX crisis through decision-making and problem-solving theories, such as rational model, behavioral and administrative model, and evidence-based decision-making. And then it is to understand how Boeing's leadership and company culture caused flawed decisions that led to two fatal crashes. Before going into the analysis of the case, let's first go through a case overview of the event. So to summarize the events, there happened two airplane crashes, one in 2018, which is the Lion Air Flight 610, and one in 2019, which is the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. Now, the cause of these crashes is due to a faulty MCAS software, which pushed the plane's nose down based on bad sensor data. Now, why this happened exactly is because Boeing rushed to compete with Airbus's new A320neo. They cut corners, avoided retraining pilots, and didn't tell regulators or pilots about the new MCAS software. Now, this resulted to 346 deaths, financial losses, reputational ruin, stricter regulations, and global discussion on corporate ethics and safety. Continuing on, I'll pass it over to Mawar to explain the organizational background and the problem.
Hi, my name is Mawar, and today I will be explaining company profiles, competitive threats, Boeing 737 MAX timeline, decision failure, and also the significance and impact of this crisis. So the Boeing company is a multinational company worldwide. They sell aircraft, rotorcraft, satellites, and also others. Boeing, founded in 1916 in Seattle, is one of the largest aerospace companies. By 2018, they had more than 170,000 employees worldwide. Their 737 aircraft family is historically the best-selling jetliner. It helps Boeing maintain around 50% global market share, and also especially in competition with Airbus. However, things changes when Airbus introduced new aircraft with major advantages. The advantages being 15% to 20% fuel efficiency, and Boeing's decision to this competitive threat is to create a new aircraft or upgrade their own model, which would only take about 4 years than designing a completely new aircraft, which would take 8 to 10 years. And finally, in 2011, to compete quickly, Boeing chose the faster option, upgrading the 737 instead of building a new plane. So the technical problem with MCAS, the new software that they added in the existing aircraft, the issue was that MCAS relied on a single sensor, so it's technically a single point of failure. Boeing also did not include MCAS in pilot manual, and the system was designed to activate repeatedly without the pilot's knowledge. So this quick fix solution was made to save time and avoid the need for expensive pilot training, but it turns out to be a fatal flaw. And now I will be explaining about Boeing 737 MAX timeline. As you can see here, it started in 2017. In March 8, Boeing 737 MAX obtained certification from FAA, which is a Federal Aviation Administration. And on May 22, their first plane had a service in Malindo Air, which is a low-cost Indonesian airline company. And on October 29, 2018, Lion Air, Boeing 737 MAX crashes into Java Sea. This is the first crisis that they have to face. For just about 12 minutes after takeoff, it crashes and killed 189 people in Jakarta. So this crash is triggered by a faulty sensor that activated MCAS repeatedly, and Boeing and FAA still allowed the fleet to continue flying. And then in March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airline Flight 302 had the same crash near Addis Ababa, which causes 157 deaths. It is the same MCAS failure pattern. The second crash led to worldwide grounding of 737 MAX aircraft. So in total, 346 lives was lost due to the decision that prioritized speed and cost over safety. And next, I will be explaining about decision failure. The Boeing crisis can be traced into 3 points of failures. First one being strategic decision. Commercial pressure was prioritized over safety. Boeing rushed to compete with Airbus instead of prioritizing safety. They also minimized costs and avoiding additional pilot training. Next is technical decision. They rely on single sensor with no redundancy. MCAS was hidden from the pilot, and also inadequate testing of failure scenarios. There will be multiple scenarios that they could had it in simulator, but they didn't. Next is regulatory failure. The FAA depended heavily on Boeing's self-assessment. This lack of independent oversight allowed major flaws to be approved. All these factors combined created a dangerous situation, which are these crises that happen. And the cultural root cause of this all is the turning point in 1997. Many experts believe that the root cause was cultural. So what happened? Before Boeing's merger with McDonnell Douglas, Boeing had a strong engineering first culture. So they prioritized engineering first. They prioritized safety and long-term reliability. But after After the merge, the culture shifted to finance first, which focused on cost-cutting and shareholder value. Short-term goals became more important than engineering integrity. This shift influenced many of the decisions that led to the Max crisis. And now I'm going to explain significance and impact of the crisis. The consequences of this crisis were massive. Financial impact: there's over $25.4 billion in direct costs, and Boeing stock fell from 440 to 89 per share. On the screen, we can see that by March 18, 2020, the share dropped to $89 per share, and it is very significant that the stock drops after the crisis. For the business impact, more than 1,000 orders were cancelled, and the CEO resigned after the Max crisis. As we can see on the graph, after December 2018, the orders significantly dropped to 9 from 169 orders, and also over 14,000 jobs were affected. And for human and industry impact, over 346 victims' families suffered unimaginable loss. Pilot trust were severely damaged. Airlines worldwide were disrupted. FAA faced a credibility crisis. Global aviation regulators implemented stricter certification reform. The key lesson here is very clear that when commercial pressure overrides safety culture, the result can be very catastrophic. I will pass to my team member to explain the decision-making analysis.
Thank you, Mawar. Hello everyone, I'm Tabina Callistadya, and I'll begin with the type of decision. So the Boeing 737 MAX case is a non-program decision, meaning it was unfamiliar, complex, and high stakes. Triggered by Airbus launch of the A320neo, Boeing responded by upgrading its 737 platform instead of designing a new aircraft. The shortcut saved time and money, leading to the introduction of MCAS, a software fix meant to avoid retraining pilots and speed up approval. Boeing operated under both risk and uncertainty. Risk came from known flaws in MCAS, like its reliance on a single sensor. Uncertainty came from not knowing how pilots would react, especially across different airlines and cultures. Despite knowing the risk, Boeing withheld information from regulators and pilots, creating an ethically compromised environment. Boeing decisions were shaped by two models, which are behavior model, where leadership pressure and a focus on speed led to poor safety decision and silenced employees, while the practical model, where Boeing prioritized short-term business goals, using MCAS as a quick fix to avoid redesign and retraining, but at the cost of long-term risk. Together, both create a flawed decision process that ignores safety and lost stakeholder trust. Now look at Boeing decision-making process step. It starts with problem identification. Airbus A320neo was a market threat, so Boeing chose to upgrade the 737 instead of building a new aircraft. During information gathering, they assessed feasibility and market trends but failed to disclose MCAS risk to regulators, weakening oversight. In the alternative evaluation stage, Boeing chose MCAS as a software fix to avoid redesign and pilot retraining by prioritizing speed over safety. Then came choice and implementation. MCAS was added without backups and pilots weren't informed. Internally, safety concerns were ignored. Finally, in evaluation and feedback, two fatal crashes exposed Boeing's poor communication and crisis management, revealing deep flaws in safety and governance. That's all from me. Now pass it to Muhammad Reza.
Thank you, Tabina, for the time and place. Now, I'm Muhammad Reza Octavianto, gonna explain influence factor and evaluation for Boeing 737 MAX. First one is creativity in problem solving. In terms of creativity in solving problems involved in the development of the 737 MAX, rather than developing new designs to incorporate something similar to Airbus A320neo, Boeing turned to developing its original 737 design to incorporate larger engines. It was apparent that there was a creativity limitation in Boeing's approach to solving safety problems related to its 737 MAX, since it depended on maneuvering characteristic augmentation system, or in short, MCAS. And also, this decision showed limited creative risk-taking due to corporate pressure and time constraint. Second one is ethical consideration. Engineers and managers are confronted with ethical issues pertaining on transparency, testing for safety, and communication between the organizational entity and regulator. In addition to this ethical misconduct, there was a tendency to overemphasize self-certification in its relationship with the Federal Aviation Administration. Violated key principles of engineering ethics, transparency, accountability, and integrity. Lastly, group dynamics. Dynamics in this group show a lack of physiological safety. According to Jong and Brookman, There was a lack of cohesion in this team, owing to difference in strategic objective between the organizational top and its engineers. This dysfunctional dynamic, marked by poor communication and siloed operation, was exacerbated by specific power structure and interdepartmental conflicts, which is power imbalance and hierarchical pressure, informational silos and lack of cross-functional review, culture of deference and suppressed dissent, and consequences which collective problem-solving failure. Next one is outcome biases and constraint. For outcome effectiveness, the result of the crisis management approach used by Boeing are less effective in terms of regaining public trust and ensuring safe development after the two major crashes that involve Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines. In procrastination in its response to handling the crisis, and its lack of focus in holding its manager collectively responsible are two prime reasons for its less effective outcome. Financially, the crisis cost Boeing over $20 billion in direct costs, including compensation to airlines, victim families, and penalties, with its stock price plummeting by nearly 60% in the immediate aftermath. In terms of reputation and accountability, the outcomes were also poor. Boeing initial CEO Dennis Muilenburg was criticized for his robotic and legalistic testimony before Congress, which was perceived as deflecting blame. Crisis management was reactive, not strategic. Next one is biases and error. Confirmation bias influenced engineers and manager interpretation of test result to favor preconceived notion concerning safety. Overconfidence bias was another factor that influenced risk exposure related to MCAS. They tended to rely on pilot training and redundancy to mitigate system weaknesses, underestimating the complexity of system interaction. And normalization of defiance was another phase used to denote ignoring safety alerts due to deviation that are considered normal. Next one is constraint. The economic pressure was immense, with Boeing needed to respond to the A320neo market dominance quickly. A delay of even a few months was considered a significant competitive threat. Organizationally, the rigid hierarchy and cultural shift from an engineering-first to a finance-first company after its merger with McDonnell Douglas created a system where bad news was suppressed. Regulatory constraint, specifically the resource-strapped FAA reliance on Boeing's own designated employees for certification, remove a critical layer of independent oversight. Finally, market constraints, such as airline demands for minimal differences from the previous 737 model to reduce pilot training costs, directly pressured Boeing to hide the MCAS system functionality, making transparency impossible.
Moving on to our recommendations of the case. So first is the alternative approaches that could have been done. So first is to use transparent, safety-first decision-making. Second is to add redundant sensors and robust MCAS testing. Third is to provide a full pilot training and disclose system details. Fourth is to prioritize engineering integrity over time or cost savings. Fourth is to collaborate closely with regulators instead of self-certifying. And then lastly is to consider a new aircraft design instead of modifying the old 737 frame. Next is the lessons learned from the case, which is profit-driven decision-making can compromise safety. Ethical responsibilities must guide engineering in choices. Importance of psychological safety for employees to speak up. Effective crisis management requires early accountability. And lastly is to strong organizational culture is essential for a safe operation. And then to our third future recommendations regarding the case is to reform company cultures, prioritize ethics and safety, strengthen communication and reporting channels, use evidence-based decision-making for all safety systems, establish independent internal safety boards, improve global regulatory cooperation, and then lastly is to rebuild public trust through transparency and corrective actions. In conclusion, the Boeing 737 MAX tragedy wasn't just a technical failure, it was a leadership and ethical failure. Boeing prioritized cost and competition over safety, and the MCAS flaw and lack of disclosure led to catastrophic consequences. This reinforces the need for ethical leadership, transparent communication, and safety-driven engineering, and demonstrates that organizational culture directly determines decisions quality. True success in aviation or any industry comes from integrity, safety, and transparency guiding all decisions. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation.